Jason.
And this is the Perfectly Screwed podcast.
And the smooth listenings of Brian Kennedy.
The smooth voice of Brian. Hey, baby. Welcome to the Perfectly Screwed podcast.
Do they have phone sex operators for ladies?
Like, what, for where
a
guys?
girl can call in phone sex?
I don't think so.
I feel like you would have that nice, sexy, deep voice.
Women are not stupid. They don't give money out for men.
Very true.
I mean, women get that for free. They could just go on Facebook and go, anybody want to talk dirty to me? There'd be like 10,000 guys like, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I didn't know.
No, they do have guy phone sex lines, but they're not for women.
Right.
They're for guys. So.
Well, even then, though, you're just talking to
them. I'm cool.
No.
I'm sorry.
Doesn't interest you?
No, not at all. I'm not going to tell
you
a guy.
Think you can say some sexy things?
No,
get
I'm
my
not.
Dick hard?
No. I'm not going to tell any guy I want to stroke his hard meaty cock or nothing like that. We're not going down that road.
Remember that Bob and Tom episode? Trucker clock, who wants it?
Who wants it?
I just want you to tell me you want to lay on top of me out of respect of the way I handle my rig.
How I handle my rig. You like how I shit.
Yeah, you got an awful big load there, Chuck.
Yeah, you like that. I'm not Gary. Like, I'm just like.
That's great.
Tell me you like how I ship them gears. But I'm not Gary. Like,
you ain't worth no damn $9.99 a minute. I'll tell you that. I'm already a little excited, so I'm gonna keep talking. Good stuff.
Oh, yes it is. Yes it is. You know, it's almost it's getting middle of September. It's almost getting near Halloween. I actually got all 8 Friday the 13th for like $25. I was excited about it. I never had the collection before.
8?
Yeah, well, the first 8 movies. There's like 12 of them or something now, but I mean, some of them just suck hot dick. Well, the 8th one really sucks. That's the one where it goes to Manhattan. It's fucking horrible.
But it's part of the collection. So.
Yeah, well, there's also Jason X, which is part of the collection where it goes to space. It's kind of at this point, it's like, please stop.
Right.
It's like, how much can you beat a dead horse? But Paranormal Activity has a new movie out. And I forget what it's called. It's Paranormal Activity something, but it actually was really good.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's about her going to an Amish area. She's investigating her Amish roots, and she releases this demon. It's actually very interesting. It's actually a really well-done movie. And I thought those movies were beating a dead horse for a while. It's kind of like, you know, they get a good idea in Hollywood, and then they just run it right into the ground as hard as they can.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like, if we can make a little money off of this idea, we're just going to kill it.
I find, too, like...
It's like
Amityville. Not a lot of original ideas anymore, either. Like, so many things are just remakes.
Well, I mean, how many ideas can you possibly come up with?
Well, that's true, too.
I mean, at this point in history, Hollywood's been going for over 100, almost 100 years now, or about 100 years, since the 20s. So, yeah, probably about 100 years. So that's 100 years of people coming up with ideas for movies. After a while, you pretty much said every story possible. I mean, you know, you got, you know, your action movies, but you're just putting a different twist on the same old thing. I mean, horror movies, you're putting a different twist on the same basic concept.
Have I ever told you about how the word Hollywood, in ancient times, the Jesuit priests would use a wand, like a magic wand, you know, to cast spells on people. And it was always made out of the wood of a holly tree.
Oh, is that why they call it Hollywood?
They would use Hollywood, right?
No shit.
To, you know, they were using Hollywood.
Yeah, to cast spells.
To cast spells to, you know, basically manipulate the minds of people, which is exactly the same thing we're doing today.
Yes. And interesting enough, speaking of manipulating minds and Halloween and such, that kind of plays into what we're talking about, because did you know or did you hear about what they used to call satanic panic back in the 80s and 90s?
No, I have not.
Oh, you've never heard of that?
Satanic panic, no.
There was this big thing going on in the middle to late 80s, early 90s. And a lot of it started with, it was involved with D&D and wizards and all that magical stuff. And people were very...
D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. Gotcha.
People were really afraid that there was these stories going on that all the kids were joining these satanic cults. And Metallica and Ozzy and all of this rock music and Edgar Allan Poe and this and that was all contributing to kids being influenced to join satanic cults. And there was this big, humongous satanic thing through the whole country. They even did commercials on TV about it.
I mean, I know what you're talking about. I don't remember the phrase "satanic panic."
Yeah, it was a phrase they coined because it's something that, like I said, happened in the middle to late '80s, early '90s, where they just thought if you listened to heavy metal and you were black and you were what later on became goth.
Yeah. Okay, I know it now. Yeah. Now I know what you're talking about.
They assumed you were just a Satan worshiper.
Yeah. Actually, I remember in high school we had my freshman year, we had a parent. There was one of these goth kids you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
He had like a hit list, right? Somebody had found this hit list that he had, and he had like names on it, people he was going to kill. Like literally, they were checking our book bags and shit for weapons when we were coming into school.
Oh yeah,
because he was claiming he was going to be in the woods,
just waiting
with a sniper rifle. Yeah.
Him and his group of Satan worshippers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, see, they said it had to do with D&D too, and then they did a movie. It's a little known movie, and I believe it was with John Travolta, and it was in the 80s. And he was a D&D dungeon master, and it was actually a true story about this guy who was playing D&D and lost his mind and thought it was real and started acting it out in real life and tried to kill people, and which that did happen, but it wasn't because he was a Satan worshiper; it's because he's schizophrenic.
Right? Yeah, of course.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
not everybody who listens to Ozzy and Billy Idol are Satan worshippers.
People go nuts. Like you said, the schizophrenic people go psycho. It's not necessarily due to anything in particular. You know what I'm saying? I mean, these games and shit now. I mean, dude, like.
Well, over the years, it's always something that's satanic. Always. When Harry Potter first came out, it was satanic. Right. Okay? For God's sakes, I remember my sister-in-law clearly saying that she would not let her children read the Harry Potter books or watch any of the Harry Potter movies because they were Satanists. Because of the wizarding world of Harry Potter is wizards, so wizards are obviously Satan.
Of course. Must be.
Yes, anything with D&D and dragons, and it's all Satan.
Well, yeah, anything, you have to open your mind and imagination up to a little bit.
It's all Satan.
That's Satan.
It's Satan.
Of course.
Damn right. Satan. Satan got him. But it's funny. It always humors me that something about Christians, and there was a comedian that said this once, and it was hilarious. He said it's funny because Christians say that whenever God does something good, that's God.
Mm-hmm.
Children's laughter, beautiful sky, flowers. But when there's a hurricane that kills 1 million people, or AIDS, or something like that, God works in mysterious ways. He doesn't work in mysterious ways. He's being an asshole.
Right.
Let's put it real.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Being an asshole is not mysterious, okay? If you worship a God who at the one hand gives you a rainbow and then at the other hand gives you AIDS, that's an asshole. It's just...
Well, not only that, but it also, to me, is always giving credence to the fact that God and Satan are the exact same thing.
They would be, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, right. It's just how you're depending to look at it.
Well, why would Satan torture anybody anyways? I mean, if you think about it, if you're doing everything he wants you to do,
right.
When you go to hell, why would he torment you? He wouldn't torment you. You're one of his boys.
Of course.
Yeah, you're one of his dudes. Why would he ever torture you?
Yeah, he's
gonna
need you.
That would be serving God's purpose, not his.
He's going to need you for the army that's going to battle God's army in the fucking final battle.
It just, none of it makes sense.
No, of course not.
None of it makes sense. It's
it doesn't make sense when you try to pawn it off as the actual word of God. Right? Then it's not going to make sense because if you're believing and a powerful, loving, almighty God, and you're also believing that the Bible is the Word of God, that's going to cause mass confusion for you because there's so many instances in the Bible where God is doing so many incredibly destructive, disgusting fucking things. You know what I'm saying? Like, how are you going to... You can't put that together.
Well, it was funny. A couple weeks ago, or about a week ago, actually, I was talking to a girl, and she said she labeled herself as a Christian. So we were talking, and she was inquisitive about what I believed, and I went into it. And I said, well, see, my problem is I can't say I'm a Christian because I don't believe everything the Bible says. And she said, well, neither do I. And I said, wait, what do you mean? And she goes, well, I believe some of it, but I don't believe God's going to send you to hell for this and this and that. And I'm like, well, then how can you label yourself a Christian? Because to label yourself as a Christian, you have to believe everything the Bible says. If you can't take parts of it and say, well, I don't think God would punish you for that if it says He would, then you're not a Christian. You're not.
Yeah,
you're your own religion or whatever.
I guess I always thought, a Christian, somebody that believes in Christ. I don't know.
Well, you believe in Christ, but technically, if you label yourself as a certain religion...
Because Jesus was a Jew.
Well, yeah, but you got to label yourself as the whole religion. You got to believe everything they say.
Yeah, you can't pick and choose. I got you. You can't pick and choose.
Right.
And then
you can't
be like,
just say,
I am this.
Well, I like this part, but this part, nah.
Right.
Yeah. The part about loving everybody, that's great. The part about you're going to hell if you sleep with people out of wedlock, we're just going to forget about that part.
The thing that's interesting about the Bible, though, is if you can pull yourself away from the fact that it's not the Word of God and read it for what it is, which is just a story, not factual, but that it is telling you a real message. The message that it's telling you is absolutely real, right?
Oh, it's the message.
But it's like a message of a movie or a book or any book.
It's a message that every religion tells you. It's the same message.
Yes, exactly right.
Treat everybody nice and don't fuck over people.
Yeah, all the Bible is a hodgepodge of other religions.
Yeah.
That are way older and way more ancient.
Correct.
And so they just put them together and constructed them in a way, and then told you it's the Word of God.
Correct. Right.
And have just absolutely deceived millions upon millions of people.
Well, speaking of deceiving people and getting into...
And not even deceiving, because Christianity really got spread through just violence, war, and conquering.
Right. Well, what we're talking about today is kind of in this lane, actually, because everything that happened in this story, and we're talking about a true crime today, guys. I know it didn't seem like it in the opening, but we are. But everything that happened was based a lot on religious beliefs, interestingly enough. And we're talking about a little town in Arkansas called West Memphis. And this was in the early 90s, 92, 93, I believe. I think it was 93. And what we're going to talk about is, of course, the West Memphis 3, which HBO and many, many people have done a lot of research and documentaries on this topic about the West Memphis 3. Let's just start off with a crime. In May 5th of 1993, there were 3-year-old boys that were out in the woods playing, and their names were Stevie Branch, Michael Moore, and Christopher Byers. They were reported that evening missing in West Memphis, Arkansas. The first report was made by Byers' adopted father, John Mark Byers, around 7. The boys were allegedly seen together by 3 neighbors who told of them seeing them playing together around 6:30 p.m. the evening they disappeared. And this will come into play later. They also said they saw one of the boys' stepfather, Terry Hobbs, around the boys. And then they saw Stephen Branch Stephen Branch's stepfather, that Terry Hobbs, he was around the boys and calling them to come home. The initial search was very limited that night. The friends and neighbors also conducted a search that night. They even visited the location that night where later the bodies were found. A more thorough police search for the children began around 8 a.m. on May 6th. And they canvassed West Memphis, focusing primarily on Robin Hood Hills, where the boys were last seen. But they saw no signs of the missing boys. Later on, around 1:45, a juvenile patrol officer, Stephen Jones, spotted a boy's black shoe floating in a muddy creek outside of town that led to a major drainage canal in the Robin Hood Hills. When they searched the ditch, they revealed the bodies of the 3 boys. They had been stripped naked. They were hog-tied with their own shoelaces. Their right ankles tied to their right wrists behind their back. The same with their left arms and legs. Their clothing was found in the creek. Some of it was twisted around sticks that had been thrust into the muddy ditch bed. The clothes were inside out. 2 pairs of the underwear were never recovered. They had lacerations to various parts of their body and mutilations to their scrotums and penis. They died of multiple injuries and drowning. They first thought they were raped, but there was no appearance of sperm, so they knew that they hadn't been raped. Now, this is horrible, obviously. It's 3 very young kids.
Yeah.
All hogtied, mutilated, and then thrown into a drainage ditch. Now,
almost like they were ritually killed or something.
yes, and not really. They were kind of just stabbed, like, to death and then drowned in the ditch. But if you had seen the photos, I've seen the autopsy photos, and they were horrific. They were just horrible.
The mutilation.
Horrific. Yeah, they mutilated that.
I guess anytime I hear
anger.
I hear mutilation, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. It seemed like there was a lot of anger.
To me, it goes to a ritual style. Like, why are you fucking mutilating someone? You know what I'm saying? That's more than killing someone.
Right. Now this is the thing. At first, they had no suspects. I mean, none. They didn't know who would have done this. And then, this young girl said that she had heard some kids at her school talking about it. The police officers immediately said that the crime had cult overtones. That's what they felt because of the mutilation, like you said, the hog tying. And the first suspect was Damien Eccles. And the reason why is because Damien Eccles was what we were talking about earlier. He was gothic. Damien Eccles wrote poetry. He was a loner. He had black hair, wore black clothes, listened to heavy metal. He had anarchist t-shirts. He's what you would consider now nothing, just a normal teenage kid.
But then a devil worshiper.
Right, but then, yes, he had books on witchcraft. He had books on occultism. Nothing strange. Nowadays you wouldn't even blink twice at something like that. But in 93, right in the middle of this satanic panic thing, in especially a small town in Arkansas, where we're talking about major Bible Belt. You know what I'm talking? Yeah, you're talking about right in the smack dab middle of the Bible Belt.
100%.
And a small town in Arkansas. On top of that, you have 3 very young kids mutilated and drowned. Okay, so there's a lot of pressure on the police force of this town. Hey, we want this crime solved. We want to know what's going on right now. And then you've got kids from his school saying, hey, this kid's weird. This kid's quiet. This kid reads Poe. This kid likes Stephen King. In fact, one of the evidence against him in the trial that he eventually went for, Damien Echols, was that he was a fan of Stephen King. They had the balls to say that was evidence.
Wow.
I promise you, swear to God, I'm not making it up.
Evidence entered into court?
Into court documents.
This kid likes Stephen King?
And Edgar Allan Poe, yes.
Holy
so
shit.
obviously,
Well, that makes me a fucking suspect then.
Clearly he was a cultist.
Right, oh yeah.
Clearly.
Well, clearly he committed the crime.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, you're not reading Stephen King, not mutilating people.
It gets so much worse. The way these boys were railroaded. It's unbelievable that they were even convicted. But anyways, let's keep going. So, Damon Echols, they thought might be a suspect because he had interest in occultism. And Stephen Jones, one of the police officers, felt that Echols, since he wore black, and this is an exact quote for him, he said, since he wore black and liked Stephen King, he was capable of murdering children.
Wow.
Right. The police interviewed Echols on May 7th, 2 days after the bodies were discovered. Just 2 days later. He took a polygraph examination and he denied any involvement. The polygraph examiner claimed that Echols' chart indicated possible deception. But we know about polygraphs too.
It indicated possible
deception.
Okay.
So on May 9th, during a formal interview by Detective Brian Ridge, Echols mentioned that one of the victims had wounds to the genitals. Law enforcement viewed this knowledge as incriminating. After a month had passed with little progress in the case, police continued to focus their investigation solely on Echols, interrogating him much more frequently than any other person. But nonetheless, at this time, they claimed he was not regarded as a suspect, but just as a source of information. So, as this is going on, there's an interesting part to this. There was a lady named Vicki Hutchinson. She was a new resident of West Memphis, but she played an important role in the investigation. Later, she said she lied about her testimony. Now, this is later. After the trial and everything, years later, she recanted her testimony, claiming her statements were fabricated, in part because the police coerced her. So she said the police made her say this. But on May 6, 1993, before the victims were found later that day, Hutchins took a polygraph exam by Detective Don Bry and determined whether or not she had stolen money, because she was already on charges also. Let's put that out there too.
Yeah.
They were looking at her for stealing money from her employer in West Memphis. But they were unable to administer the polygraph because she took her son with her and he was such a distraction they couldn't get the polygraph. Aaron was a playmate also of the murdered boys, her son. And he mentioned to Bry that the boys had been killed by the playhouse. When the bodies proved to have been discovered near where Aaron indicated, Bry asked Aaron for further details. Now, this is a little kid.
Yeah. And
Aaron claimed he had witnessed the murders committed by Satanists who spoke Spanish. That's what this little kid said. But Aaron's further statements were wildly inconsistent. He did not identify Baldwin, Echols, or Miskelly, which are the three that were accused of it, from photo lineups, and there was no playhouse anywhere near the location. Later on, a police officer leaked part of Aaron's statement to the press before anything was done, continuing the growing belief that the murders were satanic ritual. So this little 6-year-old says that he heard Satanists that were Spanish talking about the playhouse, which didn't exist, and that's where the boys were killed.
Yeah.
Now, that has nothing to do with anything, since everything he said was obviously clearly made up.
I mean, yeah.
Clearly.
Like,
I mean,
right now it looks like literally the police are just so hard fishing for circumstantial evidence.
yeah.
Like they have no, they're trying to pin this on somebody, like you said, and they're trying to do it quick.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then Hutchinson, she agrees to wear a wire and have Eccles come over to her house. Because, like I said, at this point, they're focusing in on one suspect and one suspect only.
Mm-hmm.
So she agrees to have Eccles come over. The police said they couldn't even hear the conversation. It wasn't, indistinguishable. Hutchins said later that Eccles did not incriminate himself. The police said it's inaudible, but Hutchinson's claimed the recording was completely audible. Now, this is later, of course. But on June 2nd, 1993, Hutchinson's told police that about 2 weeks after the murders were committed, she, Eccles, and Miss Kelly attended a Wiccan meeting in Terrell, Arkansas. Hutchins claimed that at the Wiccan meeting, a drunken Eccles openly bragged about killing the 3 boys. Now, Miss Kelly was first questioned on June 3rd, 1993, a day after Hutchinson's told this confession. Hutchinson was unable to recall the Wiccan meeting location and did not know any participants at the meeting. But it's funny because right after this, they dropped all charges of theft on this woman. And she later claimed that she implicated Eccles and Miss Kelly because the police said they would only drop charges if she said that they murdered the boys.
They'd only drop charges on her.
Yeah, on her.
Yeah.
So the police said, we'll drop charges on you if you say this.
They're blackmailing her.
Of course. Of course they were. And that's the thing. And that's their star witness.
Right.
That's their star witness is a woman who supposedly went to a Wiccan meeting. They can't remember anybody there. But said that Eccles was bragging about killing the 3 boys. Then they all got naked, according to her. Hold on, this is more.
This is also a woman that wore a wire to try to incriminate Eccles.
Right.
He didn't incriminate himself.
Correct.
The police say it was inaudible, but she claims it's perfectly audible. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Now, she sat there and said that they tried to have sex with her at the Wiccan meeting. They all got naked. They were all having sex with each other. And she had to run away because she was so scared of it. But she knows no participants, doesn't know where it was, has no knowledge of anything else. And this man, 2 months after he brutally murders 3 boys, is just openly telling everybody and bragging about how he mutilates genitals in his spare time. I'm sure that's what normal Wiccans do.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then they go on to get naked and fuck each other.
Right, of course.
Yes.
Here's another funny thing. The police, the night of the murders, on May 5th, 1993, at 8:42 p.m., a worker in a Bojangles restaurant located about a mile from the crime scene reported to police that night. He said a black man came in. He seemed mentally disoriented. He went inside the ladies' restroom. He was bleeding, brushed against the walls of the restroom, left blood everywhere. Okay? This is the night of the murders. This black man comes into a Bojangles restaurant 1 mile away, covered in blood, goes into the wrong restaurant room. They said he seemed mentally disoriented and was rubbing blood all over the walls. An officer from the West Memphis Police Department, Regina Meeks, responded to the call. She talked to the restaurant manager over the phone outside. She went through the drive-thru window, and they told her at this point that the man had left. So she decided there was no reason to investigate, and she just left. Mm-hmm.
Not any reason.
No reason.
No reason whatsoever. No reason to.
No.
No blood or nothing.
No, the man
possibly could be left behind.
The man left, so we're just going to leave that.
Well, that's fine. He's gone now. He got him some chicken. And he's out of here. Yeah, no reason to investigate further.
Yeah, we're good now.
Easy night for me.
Yeah. So the day after, now get this. Here we go even further with this one. The day after the victims' bodies were found, the manager of the Bojangles, Marty King, thinking there was a possible connection to the man in the restroom, reported the incident to the West Memphis Police Department. They then, the next day, inspected the ladies' room. The man, they told the police that he wore a blue cast-type brace on his arm that had white Velcro on it, and the police said, well, that would make it difficult to tie up and murder 3 boys. So the restaurant manager gave the officers a pair of sunglasses he thought the man had left behind. Detectives took some blood samples from the walls and tiles of the restroom. And then they said that later on it was testified that he lost all those blood samples.
Oh.
Now get this.
I can't fucking ever find my wallet or where I left the remote. I'll be goddamned if I can find them blood samples.
Well, get this. A hair identified as belonging to a black male was later recovered from a sheet wrapped around one of the victims. Now, this is years later, mind you.
Right.
But, yes. So, he lost the blood samples by the time court came around. They didn't investigate till the next day. The restroom had already been cleaned once. So how much blood are you actually getting? Okay? You're getting maybe a little bit.
How do you lose a blood sample?
Blood samples, not one.
That's got to be like a thorough process.
Well, what kind of police department doesn't go investigate a man covered in blood and going into a lady's restroom in the middle of the evening in a restaurant? What? I mean,
yeah. So that's the
even
night
if he had
of.
left, that's the night of.
So like that's literal incompetence. That's not even losing the blood samples could be just obviously a case of, well, we're going to pin it on these motherfuckers.
Right.
We lost them blood samples. But that night of not doing it that night, right?
Complete. But you'll see as we go through this. The police are the most hill-jack Barney Fife motherfuckers you've ever seen in your entire fucking life.
Yeah, I mean...
it's like they can't find their ass with both hands in this police department, clearly.
Right.
Okay? Yeah. Okay. So, on June 3rd, police interrogated Jesse Miss Kelly Jr. Now, this kid, who was 16 years old, had an IQ of 72. That categorizes him as borderline intellectually functioning, which, to put that simply, is he had the mind of about a 6-year-old child.
Mm-hmm.
Mentally. He was about 6. Even though he was physically 16, he had an IQ of 72, and they said he acted about the mentality of about a 6-year-old.
Right.
So he was, mentally very young. Now, he was also a minor. Now, this didn't stop the police department from questioning him alone. His parents were not present during any interrogation. Miss Kelly's father gave permission for Miss Kelly to go with the police, but did not give permission for his son to be questioned or interrogated. Miss Kelly was questioned for a straight 12 hours without a bathroom break, food, or water.
Wow.
12 hours straight.
Mm.
With a man who had the mental capacity of a 6-year-old. And out of that 12 hours, only 2 segments, totaling 46 minutes, less than an hour, were actually recorded.
Oh, are you serious?
Swear to God. Swear to God.
Wow.
46 minutes out of a 12-hour investigation was recorded. Everything else they said was completely off the books.
That's crazy.
With no attorney, no parents involved, and with no breaks whatsoever for 12 hours. After this 12 hours, and this is the funny thing, Miss Kelly gave a confession and said, yes, me and Eccles and this other kid killed the little boys after 12 hours. The problem with that confession is he later on explained that he got it wrong repeatedly. This is how the confession went, and this is the part they actually recorded, which shows how stupid this police department actually is. In the recorded confession, Miss Kelly says, yeah, we tied them up with rope. And the police officer goes, wait, you mean you tied them up with shoelaces, right? And he goes, oh yeah, that's right, with shoelaces. And then we raped him. And he goes, I saw Damien pull out his wiener and put it in the boy's butt. And he goes, no, you're wrong. There was no rape, right? And he goes, yeah, you're right. They didn't rape him.
So they're just telling him what to say.
Telling him exactly what to say. He got every aspect in this confession wrong of the case.
Right.
Right. Everything was wrong.
And then they just basically said, no.
They were feeding him, hey, right. No, you're wrong.
Classic manipulation.
On top of that, he testified later that the police told him if he did what they said, that he could go home. They wouldn't let him go home.
Which is, yeah, after 30 fucking minutes.
Yeah, they wouldn't let him go home.
I would be ready to go home.
Right.
12 fucking hours?
Right.
Without even be able to fucking eat, drink, or get up?
Right. And you're a 6-year-old mentally.
Yeah.
You're scared to death.
Yeah.
And you have the police telling you, either you tell us what we want to hear, or you don't get to go home to see your mommy and daddy.
Yeah.
You know, at that point, what's that poor boy doing? At that point, you're basically giving him no choice.
You're bullying him.
Right. Into telling you what you want to hear so you can get a confession out of this person who obviously isn't even mentally able to handle what you're feeding him.
No, and has no fucking clue.
Right.
What you're really even talking about.
Right. And he thinks if you say this, if he says what you want, he gets to go home.
Yeah.
Not realizing that, no, if he says this, he's going to jail.
Right.
Right. Even though he was informed of his Miranda rights, Miss Kelly later claimed he didn't even understand what they were talking about. In 1996, the Arkansas Supreme Court ruled that Miss Kelly's confession was voluntary and that he did in fact understand his Miranda warnings and its consequences with an IQ of 72 at a 6-year-old level. Then, portions, before the trial, mind you, before the trial, portions of Miss Kelly's testimony was released to the press and reported on the front page of the Memphis paper before any trials began. Okay. Let's get this. Let's wrap our heads around this one, ladies and gentlemen, just for a second. You got the Hutchinson woman saying that Damien Eccles, which later on she said was a complete lie because the police just basically gave her that in exchange for a theft charge being dropped. Right. Also, she said she was bullied by police, that they told her they would take away her son if she didn't tell them what they wanted to hear.
Right. Oh, wow.
Right. So, she's being threatened with her son being taken. She's being threatened with a theft charge. Both of which is, one's a felony, the other one get her son taken. Okay? Or they say, well, you say this, and everything goes away. What's she going to do? You know?
Sure.
Then you got them bringing in this guy with the IQ of a 6-year-old who thinks he's 6-year-old, doesn't even understand what they're talking about, and they're feeding him shit. Okay? And then you're going to release information to the press that should never be released. How would these boys ever get a fair trial in this town? How?
Yeah, you're not.
Of course not. You have already convicted them before they ever went to court.
Yep.
They're fucked before they ever step foot in that courtroom. Completely screwed. You got this mentally handicapped individual saying, yeah, this is what happened.
You got a confession on the front
and then you got his confession on the front page, and then you're leaking stuff that another woman said supposedly about a Wiccan thing, where somebody admitted you're leaking that on the front page.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the public already has seen all of this before the trial even begins.
Yeah, I'm like, and yeah, I mean, you make a good point about it being a small Midwest town. You know what I'm saying? And because where everybody knows everybody, everybody's talking, all the fucking rumors are being spread. There's all this fucking pressure. This needs to be taken care of. You know what I'm saying? And that's exactly what the police are doing. And it's not even a question.
No, it's complete insanity, is what it is. Now, here's the other thing they did. Okay, Eccles and Baldwin were tried together, but they made sure that Miss Kelly was tried separately. So, Miss Kelly was tried separately, and Eccles and Baldwin were tried together in 1994 under the Burton Rule. Under the Burton Rule, Miss Kelly's confession cannot be admitted against his co-defendants. So, if they had tried them all together, they couldn't take Miss Kelly's confession and use it as evidence against the other two boys. Because that's the Burton Rule. So, that's why they tried Miss Kelly separately from the other two. Because now they can use the confession in the other two trials.
Yeah.
See? Brilliant, and again, shows how they were just pounding and railroading these boys right from the fucking start.
Right. Just manipulating the entire system.
Oh, of course.
To get something that they needed.
Mm-hmm. All three defendants pled not guilty.
Having nothing to do with justice. Having nothing to do with actually trying to find who really did this.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they were not in any way, shape, or form looking at anybody but Damon Eccles from the very start of it.
And so then, their actions are all being constructed in a way that we're going to make him guilty, period.
Right, because what happened was they saw this mutilated scene. It was during, like I said, the satanic panic thing. They see this boy who's an outsider, wears black, dyes his hair black, likes Stephen King, likes Edgar Allan Poe, writes these morbid things, practices Wiccan, practices the occult. All things that nowadays would consider actually semi-normal.
Right.
But in 93, during this time period, in this little tiny town, oh God, no. That was evil. That was Satan worship.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So they were focused in on him from day one.
Yeah.
They weren't looking at anybody else. Even though clearly, like I said, there was a man in a Bojangles a mile from the crime scene covered in blood. But let's not investigate that route. Let's not look down that.
No, he's gone.
No. Yeah,
he's gone.
No, we obviously lost the blood. Yeah, we lost the blood samples anyway. So
yeah,
what are we gonna do?
Right.
I mean, what are we gonna do? I mean, we can't do nothing at this point. Can't even find the damn blood sample.
Fucked up.
Sure as hell can find that confession though.
Right.
Right. We got that. And 46 minutes out of the 12-hour fucking interrogation that you went through. 12 hours, you record 46 minutes. What kind of hillbunk, Barney Fife, Mayberry shit is going on?
Yeah, that's crazy, man.
What police department records 46 minutes out of 12 hours?
It wasn't an interrogation of somebody who is in proper mental condition, man. You know what I'm saying? It's almost like they purposely went and found somebody who they knew.
Oh, yeah, they found the one.
Manipulate into giving them what they needed.
Oh, yeah, they found the one out of those three that they knew they could talk into giving them exactly what they want.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways, back to the trial. So, during Miss Kelly's trial, Richard O'Shea, an expert on false confessions and police coercion, And Professor of Sociology at UC Berkeley testified that the brief recording of Ms. Kelly's interrogation was a classic example of police coercion. Well, duh.
Yeah.
Fucking duh.
No shit.
Yeah, no shit. You ain't got to tell us. All right? Critics have also stated that Ms. Kelly's various confessions were in many respects inconsistent with each other, as well as the particulars of the crime scene and murder victims, including, for an example, he admitted that Miss Kelly watched Damon rape one of the boys. The boys were never sexually assaulted. They proved that.
Right.
But Miss Kelly swore up and down he raped him. And then bit off his penis. Again, inconsistent. The genitals were mutilated. They weren't ripped off. He said they were tied up with rope. They were tied up with their own shoelaces. He said he saw Damon rape the boy. The boy was never sexually abused. I mean, there's just so much in his confession that is complete bullshit. It doesn't even go anywhere near the crime.
Right. It's just it's inconsistent.
Inconsistent. Hell, it's not even right in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
How would you say that's even a confession? You're confessing to something that didn't even happen.
Right.
As a police officer, any police officer with half a brain would look at that and go, well, no, obviously, there's nothing here.
Right.
Right. Any prosecutor with half a brain would have looked at that and goes, oh, hell no. No, we ain't touching this. But not in West Memphis, Arkansas, goddammit. Because in West Memphis, Arkansas, we don't prosecute the Satan worshipers.
We got them.
We got the Satan worshipers, okay? We got them. That's all we need. That's all we need. Okay. Okay. On February 5th, 1994, Miss Kelly was convicted by a jury of 1 count of first-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree murder. The sentence that the court imposed on this poor man was life plus 40 years in prison. Okay. They appealed the conviction, but the Supreme Court in Arkansas affirmed the conviction. 3 weeks later, Eccles and Baldwin went on trial. The prosecution accused the young men of committing a satanic murder. They called a graduate of an unaccredited, listen to this, they called an unaccredited graduate of Columbia Pacific University a mail-order school as their expert witness in the occult.
What happened?
Okay. This guy, this was their star witness. His name was Del W. Griffiths. He was an unaccredited, which means no accreditation, of a mail-order college. Like, okay, before there was online colleges, there was things called mail-order colleges, where you sent in the mail for a booklet.
Okay.
And you would pay them money. They'd send you a booklet on whatever study you wanted to study.
Right.
Then you would send back the tests to the college, quote unquote. And if you got the stuff on the test right, they sent you basically a butt wiping degree. It was the most bullshit nonsense in the world because it was unaccredited, which means it wasn't really a college. It was just some guys in a warehouse that sent you a book on the occult. You read it, sent back their little quiz, and you got a degree.
Right.
And this is their expert on the occult. Okay, this is their main go-to guy here.
Right.
It's some Joe Schmo that read a couple books that he got from the bookstore on witches, and that's what they got as an expert.
Right.
Okay, here we go. This trial's starting off well, isn't it?
Yeah,
love it. So, he testified to the murders, that the murders were a satanic ritual. But on cross-examination, he admitted that he had no accreditation, that there was no expertise at all that he had read 2 or 3 Wiccan and witchcraft books, and that's how he got his occult degree. So,
right.
Obviously, this guy's an expert. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he read Stephen King, and clearly. Okay. Okay. So, another aspect of the trial was that they said Eccles had knowledge of genital mutilation and occult and this and that. And Eccles said, the only thing I know of is what I've seen on TV and what I've read in a few occult books. He said, I don't know anything other than that. He said, and the other stuff is just stuff I've read in the newspaper that was posted by you guys.
Right.
Right? Eccles testified that Detective Ridge's description of their earlier conversation, which of course was not recorded. It's funny how all these interrogations are just magically not recorded at this police department.
No shit.
Yeah. All these interrogations they have, they lose blood samples, they can't find the recordings. I mean, they got a girl in the corner writing it on a steno pad. That's cool. It's fine. Yeah, it's fine.
No, it is what it is, dude. These kids, they're obviously being pinned as Satan worshippers who committed a crime.
Hey, wait a second. Do you hear that, Jason? Do you hear it?
That's right. Yeah, but I don't remember Barney Fife ever trying to pin shit on people.
Damn. I didn't know. But Jesus Christ. Okay, so Eccles said that the details that he learned of the case was given to him by Detective Ridge in their early interrogations and conversations. And Ridge said later on that no, he just told him a bunch of lies to try to trip him up. But Eccles claims everything he knew about the case was given to him by the police department.
Right.
Okay. Now, Eccles also said that information had come from police leaks from the paper and also comments to Mark Byers, which was one of the kid's dad that was murdered. And it was circulated amongst the local public. And then they tried to bring up the fact that he had fights in school. They said that Eccles had fights in school, and Eccles said it was because of bullying, right? He had to defend himself. The prosecution kept saying, well, you have a violent past. And the defense tried to argue that that had nothing to do with what's going on right now. Of course, they were overruled by the judge. Everything the defense tried to put up, the judge was like, no, overruled. I mean, they said, do you like Stephen King, Mr. Eccles? And he said, because he took his own defense. He took the stand. And they said, do you like Stephen King? He said, yes. Why do you like Stephen King? He said, just appeals to me. And he goes, wasn't Stephen King kind of dark? Isn't it kind of graphic? Isn't it murderous? And then they asked him things like, do you have Wiccan beliefs, Mr. Eccles? And he's like, yes. And he says, oh, so you're a witch. And he goes, no, Wiccan's about nature. And he goes, oh, so you believe that Satan is in nature? And he goes, no. And he goes, what do you do with these Wiccan rituals? He goes, I've never been to a Wiccan ritual. He said, well, what do you know about Wiccan? He said, just what I've read in books.
Right.
And they said, what do you know about the occult? He goes, just what I read in books. And they were like, well, you listen to Ozzy Osbourne, don't you? And he was like, yes. And they go, why do you listen to such satanic, evil music? Why do you dress all in black, Mr. Eccles? Yeah, questions like this.
Crazy.
Is what got him convicted. Okay? They convicted him on the fact that the detective told him details about the case that he already knew because the detective told him. stuff he'd read in the paper. Okay. He liked Stephen King. And he liked Edgar Allan Poe. And he liked Ozzy Osbourne. And he all dressed in black. Those were enough. Those facts that I just told you are the facts of the case. Now,
wow.
No evidence other than that was ever linked to any of them. Except for one thing. They did find one thing. Behind the house of Damien Echols, in a river, they found a rusty knife. And they had a guy get on the stand that said it's possible that that knife could possibly match the wounds on the boy. They found, now let me repeat that. They found a rusty old knife in a river behind a home.
Nothing in the case is definitive either. It's all, well, it's possible.
Well, of course.
Of course it's fucking possible.
Well, it's also possible that fucking Jiminy Cricket bounced along out of the Disney cartoons.
It's possible that the knife's sitting in our kitchen cabinets.
Yeah.
Causing the fucking wounds on the boys.
Right.
I mean, God.
They find a rusted knife behind a house in a river with no connection to this kid at all. None. No one said it was his knife. No one said he ever had the knife. No one said he'd ever seen the knife.
Right.
They even said they'd never seen the knife. That knife could have been there for 10 years for all they know.
Yeah, it probably has been. Rusty.
Right. But that obviously, clearly points to
possibly murder. Was the
I mean,
knife, right?
Clearly. I mean, you find a knife, you know.
That's all we need. Murder weapon. I mean, I got the weapon. The kid wears black. What do you want?
I mean, yeah. I mean, come on. He wears black. He listens to Ozzy.
There's a knife in the river.
He's a Wiccan. Knife in the river. He reads Stephen King.
He's lucky we're not hanging him.
I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, what more evidence do we need?
None. That's it.
Oh,
Cases are at, folks.
So, on March 19th, 1994, Echols and Baldwin were found guilty on all 3 counts of murder. The court sentenced Echols to death, gave him the death penalty, and Baldwin to life in prison without parole. On the evidence that I just stated.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
On the evidence. So, before we get into the second part of this, because I'm going to end this here in a second, because we're getting on an hour, and we'll go into, in the second part, let me explain. We'll go into even more stuff of how incredibly fucked this whole case is, and how they fucked these 3 guys.
Right.
Even more. No, you think this is bad. Just wait till how they fuck them after this. And we'll get into some even more interesting evidence that even today, at this point, in 2022, Arkansas refuses to even look at. Refuses to even talk about because of all of this. Now, let me see. Now, let me see here. Let's review. You have a kid who's a goth, who listens to heavy metal music. You have Baldwin, who says he has no idea what the fuck's going on. And by the way, Baldwin also, I didn't mention this, but he passed his polygraph.
Right.
So the other kid passed the polygraph. Okay? Now, Echols did fail the polygraph, I'll give you that, but who knows how reliant polygraphs are. But let's go on. You got another kid who is, in a 12-hour interrogation, coerced, clearly, into telling the police what they want to hear, and still doesn't get it right.
Right.
He's told what to say, still can't get it right, on tape, after 12 hours.
So they basically tell him what he meant.
So after 12 hours of them going through this, and telling him what to say. This man is so mentally unstable that he still can't get the story right.
Right.
That tells you how much he was really comprehending in this whole thing, which is zero.
Yeah.
Okay? So you got that, which is coerced confession that wasn't even correct. And your evidence in the whole trial, okay, your evidence in the whole trial is this confession that was clearly nonsense. And that this kid wears black, reads Stephen King,
right,
likes Edgar Allan Poe, and listens to Ozzy. So clearly, that means that on the weekends he likes to mutilate young boys.
Right.
I mean, clearly. And I mean, then they did find the rusty knife. I mean,
they got that.
I mean, there is a rusty knife. I mean, there's nothing tying the knife to the murder or to him. But, you know, I mean, we found a knife. It was behind the house. Could have been anywhere. But we found it. It's behind the house. I mean, how often do you find knives in the bottom of a river that's rusted behind someone's house? I mean, never.
No.
Never.
But yeah, basically they have nothing on these boys and
Nothing.
they have been convicted.
Nothing.
So.
And convicted, yes, of murder. One's looking at the death penalty. One's looking at life plus 40 with the possibility of parole. The other's looking at life without parole. You're talking about a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old, and an 18-year-old.
Man.
Yeah. The most ridiculous shit I ever heard in my life. But anyways, this is part 1 of the Memphis 3, and we will come back with the next episode, and make sure you listen to it. That will be part 2, and we'll talk about what happened in the aftermath of all these trials. And thank God for certain people, because it was celebrities and people like that actually finally got a little bit, and I do say very little, justice for these guys.
Right.
But it was many, many, many years later. And they still haven't had full justice. And I think it's still a gross miscarriage of justice what happened. But at least they got a little bit of something.
Right.
But we will talk about that in the next episode, episode 67. So if you guys like this, make sure you tune in next time to listen to the next part of this. Well, see you guys next time.